hosted by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth in honour of President Michael D. Higgins. At the conclusion of this first day of President Higgins' state visit to the United Kingdom. There you see guests arriving for the banquet. We're looking at the British Foreign Secretary William Hague there, the Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland Martin McGuinness among those gathering in St George's Hall, soon to take their seats at this enormous table. Everybody's seated at the same table for this banquet in Windsor Castle, hosted by Her Majesty and attended by the guest of honour in Windsor Castle this week, President Michael D. Higgins and his wife Sabina. We'll be bringing you live coverage of the banquet, the two speeches which will be delivered at the outset by first the Queen and then replied to by Michael D. Higgins, and then the rest of the banquet is private. The cameras withdraw at that point. We're joined here in our position at Windsor Castle by Siobhan Brannock, who's editor of the Irish Post, and by Kate Williams, a royal historian. Thank you both again for being with us. Kate, we're looking there at the pictures of St George's Hall and that splendid table set for these, I think it's something like 160 guests.
160 guests, and that's pretty much what it normally is, 160, 170, and there's a huge amount of planning goes in there. It's an incredibly long table, and what they used the George IV service, which we talked a lot about George IV, who was the first king to go visit Ireland after the Act of Union in 1821. He had this incredible service, so it's 4,000 pieces, really 8,000 of them, and they put them in. It takes days and days to lay the table and organise it, because everything has to be measured so it's exactly the right distance apart. And indeed, they polish that table. The footmen put on their socks and get these croquet mallets covered in soft material and scrub it up and down like they're playing croquet. So it's there's lots of esoteric tradition there.
Somebody told me that the Queen herself inspects the table before her guests arrive.
She does. Right? She inspects the table. There's usually about 23 flower arrangements. She inspects the table. She inspects the flowers. It has to be absolutely perfect. It really does.
I see Terry Wogan, one of a number of people from the Irish community living in Britain who are attending this banquet this evening. There's Taoiseach Enda Kenny, British Prime Minister David Cameron. They're chatting to Martin McGuinness, the Deputy First Minister in the Northern Ireland Assembly. Siobhan Brannock, from the point of view of the Irish community, there's clearly going to be significant participation by Irish people, notable Irish people living here in Britain.
Absolutely, I think that's very key to this visit, that it's very much, there's a participation from a lot of the Irish community at all different levels, and I think that's something we'll see tonight at the state banquet as well, which will be fantastic.
Right. And from the British point of view, Kate, I mean, who are the people who we might expect to be among the invitees on the British side?
Well, we'll expect the royal family, we'll expect the politicians. We've seen David Cameron there, Nick Clegg will be there, the Deputy Prime Minister, and Ed Miliband will also be there, the leader of the opposition. And we expect to see quite a few dignitaries. And really, this is a great moment. It's the state banquet is obviously a celebration of the visit, but it also is something very serious, and that's because we are going to see another speech from President Higgins. We saw one earlier to the Houses of Parliament. We'll see another one from him, and we're also going to see one from the Queen as well. And we'll remember that in 2011, in her visit to the state banquet at Dublin Castle, her visit to Ireland, that's when she said some very important points about how the relationship can move forward and the mistakes Britain had made.
Strong representation at the banquet this evening from members of the artistic community, the arts community in Britain and Ireland. I saw Dame Judy Dench there just a moment ago. I know Daniel Day-Lewis, who's an Englishman who lives in Ireland.
Him, well, yeah, sounds like fun.
He has strong Irish connections as well. Daniel Day-Lewis.
A bit.
Gary Hines of the Druid Theatre Company from Galway. She's there as well. So I suppose that reflects the president's obviously great interest in engagement with the arts.
It does, and I mean this programme we'll see so much culture coming over the next few days. Obviously the Royal Albert Hall, we have the Callura celebration, and there'll be Irish music, dance, poetry, arts, drama. So I think seeing some of these people here tonight is maybe a flavour of what's to come over the next couple of days.
Yes, and of course they're visiting Stratford, and I think it is a great celebration. We don't get many presidents who are also poets and great writers, as Michael Higgins is. And I think also, the Queen herself sees culture as a great way to build links between countries, a great way outside of politics to celebrate the differences and to celebrate the similarities.
And it's an area, I just saw Peter Robinson there, the First Minister of Northern Ireland, And I mean, of course, the area of the arts and culture is in terms of the Irish and British experience is one in which there's been very enriching cross-fertilisation, hasn't there, Siobhan?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, if you take it right down to local level, if you're in London, there's plenty of Irish sessions every night, traditional music. The Irish artists who come over here to perform, there's people like Imelda May, who we'll see on Thursday night at the Royal Albert Hall. She's obviously based here. On the West End, we have shows like Once, we have Commitments, and it's being embraced by the British public as much as Irish people here as well.
And so there you see the guests. It's all very relaxed. I think people chatting there's I think that's Norma Major, by former British Prime Minister John Major, of course, who played such a crucial role. John Major did in the very initial stages of the Northern Ireland peace process back in the early 90s.
But I don't believe that Tony Blair is going to attend. I mean, we don't know for sure, but it doesn't seem like he is on the list, which is obviously an interesting omission because he worked, he would see it as one of his most important legacies, the peace process.
Well, one of those we do know is on the list is former President Mary McAleese. She'll be there, and in her presidency also marked that reaching out to the Irish community in Britain as well, didn't it, Siobhan?
It absolutely did. I think both Mary McAleese and Mary Robinson were very key to the story of the Irish here in Britain. I know Mary Robinson, who's in Rwanda, I think this week will very much be, I'm sure, watching tonight and would have loved, I'm sure, to have been here herself. Mary Robinson was one of the first Irish presidents to come here, and obviously took after
and the first to meet a monarch, the first Irish president ever to meet a monarch, and it was they were working so hard behind the scenes for the peace process because this banquet seems so much fun now, but it would have been unthinkable in the 70s. It just shows how much incredibly hard diplomatic work on the behalf of the government, on the behalf of ministers, and also on behalf of the royal family, for whom this is a really important issue. I think the Queen definitely wants it to be seen as one of her legacies. The great rapprochement between Britain and Ireland, and I think we'll expect to see President Higgins talking about that in his speech.
St George's Hall is the largest room. It seems a bit inadequate to describe it as a room, but the largest space within Windsor Castle. Kate.
You've got to squash them in. It's the largest room. It is a room for the state banquets. I'm afraid the Queen doesn't only eat her dinner there in general. It is something that's incredibly formal, but it is also the Queen. It's very important to the Queen to put her guests at rest. She doesn't want them to be worried and freeze up. It's supposed to be a celebration, and also the cameras aren't there, so people can relax.
And I think we just saw Daniel Day-Lewis. I think that's Roy Foster on your right of the screen, Professor Roy Foster, a historian who has written much about the relationship between Britain and Ireland, and written with great authority and insight. There I'm looking now at John Major. I imagine it's not the first time that he's attended one of these banquets.
Good perk of being a Prime Minister, quite a few of these. And we'll know the banquet is finished by the pipers who come in, and that's a tradition of Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria had a passion for bagpipes, so intense that her staff couldn't really cope with it. But after that, she thought that the pipers have to finish a state banquet, so they still do, even though perhaps her passion for bagpipes isn't quite matched these days in the modern royal family.
Oh no, Daniel Day-Lewis just moving towards his place. I don't know if they have place names. Do they, Kate, or do you consult a board on the way in?
There'll be a board and there'll be a place planning, but you have to know before you go in where your place is, because the last thing that they want is people like wandering around the table. I'm going, where am I sitting? There's 150 places here.
And the staff who'll be serving the banquet this evening, they obviously have a busy evening ahead of them, and to help the process run smoothly, there's a traffic light system.
It's intrinsically planned. As I was saying, it's measured. The measurement, there's place laying, and when it comes out actually serving the food, it is a case of red, amber, green, because usually about 100 footmen will be serving the food as fast as possible. That's very important for the Queen. She doesn't like her important guests to be kept waiting, so she wants the food to be on the table as fast as possible. And so we will expect to see this, of course, because the speeches are so important, that they are the big moment that we will expect to see. And I think this is an evening in which the Queen can really look back on her reign and look back on the great changes in her reign. She was evacuated to Windsor Castle when she was just a child. She loves the castle. It is her private home. That's what she sees it as. And here it is, marking a day in which a lot of her work has created a new and great rapprochement between England and Britain and Ireland. But as President Higgins was saying earlier, the work's not all done. There's still work to go. We mustn't rest on our laurels. And there's even though there's great hope, we can't be complacent.
Well, among the guests this evening, I gather Brian O'Driscoll and his wife Amy Huberman. I don't know if we've managed to see them yet, but they'll be attending. Also Louise Kennedy, the designer, the dress designer who has designed, I believe, all the outfits worn by Mrs. Higgins, today.
And she's wearing a gown. Apparently her dress today is all about the Connemara crystal, so it's very, very beautiful.
Well, I'll be depending on you to talk us through that. Philip Tracy, the very famous milliner here in Britain, originally from County Galway, so he's from the President's adopted county. He's among those Irish who've really made their lives here in Britain and been enormously successful in Britain. And I suppose that's part of the Irish story. That
it is part of the Irish story, and tomorrow obviously we'll see Mrs. Higgins Sabina visit Rada, and obviously there will be a fashion event where they'll, I'm sure, celebrate the likes of Philip Tracy and Louise Kennedy and all of those kind of up-and-coming designers, of which there are absolutely many, people like Una Burke, and doing extraordinary pieces and really putting the Irish name out there, I think, on a fashion.
I think we can see Gary Hines there, theatre director, just in the middle of your picture. She'll, I suppose, appreciate the theatrical nature of the evening.
Tony Blair said this is like a spectacular piece of theatre. He says it's pure theatre, but no theatre, I think, could put on something quite as dazzling as this. It is all about magnificent. We saw this amazing kind of magnificent procession earlier, all in line, all perfect. That's the same. It's planned to the nth degree, and the Queen herself is a very orderly, organised person, so she is overseeing. And what we aren't seeing here is her coming in, because she won't come in until everyone's organised in their places.
And I suppose, the Queen is involved at a number of key moments in this visit, Siobhan, and we saw her obviously greeting Michael D. Higgins this morning. She'll host a reception here for people from Northern Ireland on Thursday evening, and there's also the state banquet this evening. So this is really one of the three main events in which she is centrally involved.
She's very involved, and I think that's quite a rare thing, Kate, if I'm right, in terms of the level of involvement that's been attached to this visit. And I think it shows the significance of it, really, and the fact that the British royal family really wanted to get this one right and make a really positive statement.
That make a big statement, and it's important for our government as well, who want this to be a great capital moment.
Well, now I can see the President and walking there with the Queen as they make their way towards St. George's Hall, followed by Mrs. Higgins and Prince Philip, and then the other. I suppose if it wasn't at one table, you say this is the top table, but there's just one table, so I suppose we'll call these the principal guests for the evening.
In the middle section, they'll usually be in the middle section.
And you can see they're making their way. I think that's Thomas Name Gilmore I see there, and others who are accompanying the President, Princess Anne, I think you'll see there as well, and they're just making their way. I think this is across the Waterloo Chamber, and then we'll just lose our visual contact for a moment or two before they enter St. George's Hall. And you can see there everybody is remaining on their feet.
Yes.
Until the Queen and her guests arrive and take their seats. And then we will have the formal part of this banquet, playing of national anthems, the toasts and speeches from both the Queen and Michael D. Higgins. So now the guests take their seats following the British national anthem, and then the Queen will deliver her speech, we're told about 3 minutes in duration, at the end of which she will propose a toast to the President of Ireland and Sabina Higgins. So people just settle themselves in there. So these 160 guests wait now for the Queen to rise and to greet her guests.
Mr. President, Prince Philip and I are delighted to welcome you and Mrs. Higgins to Windsor Castle. The castle was founded by William the Conqueror almost 1,000 years ago. And 1,000 years ago, this very month, across the Irish Sea, Brian Boru, the most celebrated of Ireland's high kings, lost his life at the Battle of Clontarf. Yet despite 10 centuries of intervening history, Windsor Castle has had to wait until today to see a formal visit to this country by a head of state of Ireland. Prince Philip and I recall our visit to Ireland with the greatest pleasure. We were received warmly wherever we went. Dublin, the city of Cork and its English market, Ireland's historic landmarks like the Rock of Cashel, your people's famous hospitality, and of course Ireland's thoroughbred horses. All these and much more left a happy and enduring impression. But even more pleasing since then is that we, the Irish and British, are becoming good and dependable neighbours and better friends, finally shedding our inhibitions about seeing the best in each other. Our two governments have responded to the change in mood. We now cooperate across the full range of public business. Indeed, there is today no closer working relationship for my government than that with Ireland. This fresh spirit is helping us economically. Our trade is growing, supporting many thousands of jobs in both countries. And we are working together to win new business overseas. As our countries enter a period of historical resonance, it is right to look back in remembrance. In Dublin, I laid wreaths in the Garden of Remembrance for those who died in the cause of Irish freedom, and at Island Bridge, where Ireland's dead from the First World War are commemorated. In August, we will mark solemnly the centenary of Britain's entry into World War I, calling to mind the terrible toll it took. People from Ireland were involved in all the major campaigns and battles of the war. We will remember and honour their contribution and sacrifice, just as we remember our own. My family and my government will stand alongside you, Mr. President, and your ministers throughout the anniversaries of the war and of the events that led to the creation of the Irish Free State. People have moved freely between these islands over the centuries. Britain has been hugely enriched by the migration of Irish men and women to these shores. The contribution of Irish people to Britain has reached into every walk of life. On your visit, you are meeting men and women of Irish descent in Parliament, in our universities, in our health service, in the civil service, music, faith, business, and sport. And yet, over the years, many Irish migrants to Britain encountered discrimination and a lack of appreciation. Happily, those days are now behind us, and it is widely recognised that Britain is a better place because of the Irish people who live here. We can celebrate not just the Irish men and women who helped to build Britain, but also the Irish architects who helped to design it, including that great architect of parliamentary reform, Daniel O'Connell, whose life and work you will have remembered this afternoon on your visit to Parliament. Mr. President, 2 years ago, London hosted the Olympic Games. During that magical summer, the Games proved to be a remarkable success, surpassing most people's expectations. They also shone a light on the modern links between Britain and Ireland, as Irish companies worked alongside British ones in building the stadiums and running the games themselves. And it took someone of Irish descent, Danny Boyle, to get me to jump from a helicopter. Mr. President, sadly last year we lost the poet Seamus Heaney, whose roots lay in the Northern Irish countryside. His poems, written over many decades, reflected the changing circumstances of Northern Ireland, as hope and history jarred and then slowly began to rhyme. I'm delighted that last year's G8 summit in County Fermanagh and the City of Culture Festival in Derry, Londonderry, showed the very best of Northern Ireland to the world. And we will be recognising the work of individuals and groups who are helping to bring about further positive change, including the charity Cooperation Ireland, of which we are joint patrons, at a reception here on Thursday. Our two governments will continue to work together in Northern Ireland to support the First and Deputy First Minister and the Executive to advance the peace process and to establish a shared society based on mutual respect and equality of opportunity. Mr. President, the goal of modern British-Irish relations can be simply stated. It is that we who inhabit these islands should live together as neighbours and friends, respectful of each other's nationhood, sovereignty and traditions, cooperating to our mutual benefit, at ease in each other's company. After so much checkered history, the avoidable and regrettable pain of which is still felt by many of us, this goal is now within reach. I started by speaking of 10 centuries of history, but there is a balance to be struck between looking back at what has happened and cannot be changed, and looking forward to what could happen if we have the will and determination to shape it. My visit to Ireland and your visit this week, Mr. President, show that we are walking together towards a brighter, more settled future. We will remember our past, but we shall no longer allow our past to ensnare our future. This is the greatest gift we can give to succeeding generations. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to rise and drink a toast to the President and Mrs. Higgins and to the health and prosperity of the people of Ireland.
the toast to the President of the People of Ireland, and now President Higgins will reply.
Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, thank you for your kind and generous welcome and for the warm hospitality that you have extended to me, to Sabina, and to our delegation. That welcome is very deeply felt and appreciated by me and by the people of Ireland whom I represent. However long it may have taken Your Majesty, I can assure you that this first state visit of a President of Ireland to the United Kingdom is a very visible sign of the warmth and maturity of the relationship between our two countries. It is something to be truly welcomed and celebrated. Your Majesty, you famously used some words of Irish during your state visit to Ireland. Today I would also like to turn again to the oral tradition of our ancient language. A shanachal, a wise saying, often applied to the mutuality of relationship. It observes simply, sco céile a warmid. Because sco literally means shadow, this phrase is sometimes translated as we live in the shadow of each other. However, there is a more open and more accommodating meaning. Sco also means shelter. Because sco, the word embodies the simple truth that physical proximity brings with it an inevitability of both mutual influence and interaction. But more importantly, I believe it implies the opportunity, even the obligation, of reciprocal hospitality and generosity. The kind of generosity reflected in your words this evening, when you encourage us to embrace the best version of each other. Ireland and Britain live in both the shadow and in the shelter of one another, and so it has been since the dawn of history. Through conquest and resistance, we have cast shadows on each other, but we also have gained strength from one another as neighbours, and most especially from the contribution of those who have travelled over the centuries between our islands, and particularly in recent decades. The contribution of Irish men and Irish women to life in Britain, which Your Majesty has acknowledged with such grace, is indeed extensive and lends itself to no simple description. It runs from building canals, roads and bridges in previous centuries to running major companies in the present, all the while pouring